Hello, I'm Andrew Dyer, and welcome to part one of this very special 700th edition of the Roundball Report, the only show in the area dedicated to highlighting the excellence of the high school, college, and professional basketball teams which play in the Washington metropolitan area. And this show is so special that I have with me my co-host for 14 of the 16 years, former University of Maryland All-American, the head girls basketball coach of South Lakes High School, the voice of the Washington Mystics, ESPN, and all worlds of basketball, Christy Scott.
Hey.
Christy, it's just so awesome that you have come back, and it's just amazing that you still look the same after all these years. I mean, I wish fortunately we've changed technology so we couldn't find the original tapes to show how much I've changed over the years, but you still have kept things intact.
Maybe it's Maybelline or something like that.
And Christy,
no, it's always great to be back.
Thanks to our long-term partnership with CTV, we have been able to revitalize your career. You had already started at Home Team Sports, but once you played overseas, came back, we connected, branched on to bigger things, and it's just been a proving ground for so many talented people. And we have one of them that's gone on to incredible things that's going to join us via telephone.
Well, a special guest that we have with us today is Miss Josina Anderson. She started here at the Roundball Report, did various things for CTV, and now she is a reporter for ESPN, and she's joined us now on the phone. Josina, welcome back to the Roundball Report.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Doing great, but it's so fantastic to see you every time ESPN comes on and they're throwing something out to you. Josina Anderson with the report. Talk about how important it was just to cut your teeth here in PG County at CTV and then going out to Denver and doing some great things out there prior to your ESPN stint.
Well, I think, at CTV in the D.C. market, what was instrumental about that for me was honing the hustle aspect of what I'm doing now, because everything about reporting is hustling and ownership over your story and how you can enterprise it and make it uniquely yours. And in addition to that, the opportunity that Roundball Report, Sideline Report provided in terms of access into the pro sports that I was covering, the locker rooms that had the, experts in there, like the Michael Wilbons, the Steve Weishes, the John Mitchells, David Aldridges as well, and watching those people and how they were able to get exclusive content. Because one of the things that always stood out to me is how is it that we're all talking about the same thing for post-game in the locker room, gathered and huddled around an athlete, and then in the Washington Post the next day, you would read something different. And that always stood out to me like, And then, the more you would notice how Wilbon, Aldridge, and those guys, people, they would stay back and get their own material and how they were able to develop their names around that unique material. So I think as an overview, what the show allowed me to do was to keep my foot in the journalism door while I was still having another job. It provided a platform to have access to the teams, to learn how to cover professional teams, and then also in terms of how to uniquely get information that can be attributed just to you, which is so much of what the lifeblood of this business is about.
And Josina and Christy as well. I mean, one of the things that was so unique about our opportunities, we got the access, but we had to do everything on our own. And so it's almost like when you get to the higher level, it's almost like it's easier. You have the four letters preceding you, whereas before we had the reputation that Christy and I established initially, and you were able to follow in on the Roundball Report tag. But just talk about that grind that it took to, hey, we thankfully with talented people like yourself, Christy, and all the others that have followed, we were never viewed as a quote unquote public access station because it was extremely talented people, and talk about how just coming in and establishing your own name and garnering those relationships, just getting that access, how it makes it a little bit, how it may seem to make it a little bit easier now that you have ESPN in front of your title.
Well, there was a lot of ground to break when it came to, just garnering the respect to get, the access consistently. And I know, Andrew, you have taught me so much about how to compose a tactful email when it comes to having to write people, you know, when you're not necessarily having the most help to get your way. And that is such a valuable lesson when it comes to dealing with people that I took forward from you especially, and then also moving and dealing with people just in the, you know, beyond that, because there's always going to be a lot of red tape. There are people now who are necessarily going to be for you, people that are not going out their way to help you. And in a lot of ways, those battles are still there. It might be on a different level, but there's always things that you're still dealing with on the flip side of any coin. But with respect to Roundball Report, and when I was there at that time, yes, you know, I do remember a lot of times where Christy and I would be there in the locker room, and there's certain access and things that we were trying to do to get the show done. And it wasn't always the easiest road that was paved in order for us to achieve that. And so you really had to have an enterprising mentality, a hustle mentality to still fight through the obstacles and the hurdles and let yourself be known as someone who was going to be pushing through, someone that was still to be respected, someone that still had the ability to connect with the players, even though the microphone flag didn't say ESPN, TNT, ABC. It was still about the person behind the microphone and the opportunity that allowed you to have that flag on that microphone.
Well, Josina, you have a background in track, and you were talking about the hurdles that you had to jump while a member of the Roundball Report, but a hurdle that you leaped over to get to Denver, and then all of the stories that you broke out there. How did the hustle mentality assist you in getting the job done there?
That's a great question, because you know, when I came to Denver, at least my perspective is that the mentality out there collectively was not the mentality that I experienced in D.C., where it's a lot of sharp, you know, reporting as far as trying to get things that are unique. And so I took that mentality to Denver, and I felt like when I first got there, there was more of a comfort level with all the stations being able to get the same sound, same time, same this. And like when I would interview Champ Bailey when he was a Redskin, you know, I would pull him aside to get my stuff for you all. But then when I get to Denver, there's this, oh, well, Champ only talks on Thursday and he talks to everybody. And I was like, no, that's my understanding. Wow. See? And so and I'm looking at Champ like, okay, well, you know, I know you from back, so I know you're not pulling this Thursday or Friday stuff with me. You see what I'm saying? And that's the same mentality that I took, whether it was with him, Rod Smith, the guys in the locker room, because it was really about, you know, to me, the news, the first three letters in news is NEW, new. So I'm trying to get something different, new, not what everybody else is trying to get. And literally from there, I would say the first 6 months into my tenure in Denver, my first big breaking story came with Ricky Williams and him, you know, on the drug suspension for a year off the marijuana. And then it kind of took its life from there. And I would say, lastly, that mentality came from, I never put the pressure on myself to break every story out of Denver. If I'm in D.C., if I'm in Denver, Chicago, I don't put the pressure on myself to break every Denver story. I put the pressure on myself to break every story where my contacts are. And so that's what really parlayed the mentality into breaking things outside of Denver, even though I was in Denver, which was really a new mentality to them. Why is she breaking things with the Chiefs, the Eagles, what have you? And it really wasn't because I was trying to show my reach nationally. It was more so, well, this guy used to play for the Broncos, now he's with the Eagles.
Right.
And so that's how that happened.
Right.
And talk about how important it was to establish that credibility and trust with those contacts to get that comfort level to have them give you stories they wouldn't necessarily give to other people.
Well, I've always been about my word, and there's no story that I would break to advance myself and break trust with any source. There are times when I've known things about players going to different teams or what have you, where if somebody told me that off the record, the way I felt like I was going to further my relationship with them is to show that that they could trust me. So if I had to lose one story to make sure I got 9 in the future, I was okay with losing that one story. And that's really the same mantra that for myself that I follow with all of these stories. I'd like to think that, you know, I've always done my best to maintain my word, and for people to be able to trust you. And also conversely, because I need to be able to trust them. Because if you think about it, when anybody's breaking a story on an athlete that maybe broke an ankle, or this athlete has signed this contract with this team, none of us reporters are looking at the x-ray. Right. None of us are looking at the contract. So all of us are still relying on what we're being told from Schefter, Mortensen on down. So that trust is a two-way street.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you really think about it, we're all very vulnerable to being burned.
Right.
No question.
So that trust is a two-way street, and that's why it's important both ways. You know?
No question about it, especially with Twitter, and you see a tweet, and if you retweet it, it's not valid, and you're caught out there verifying it. So with your move to ESPN, what have been your biggest challenges outside of the Twitter situations that could go either way with confirming stories?
Well, I would say first and foremost would be the travel. The travel to me is easily one of the biggest things that was, or especially when I first started, a big hurdle, because, I went from, I was the type of person where if I travel one place, let's say for vacation, then I could be asleep, because, I was living with my parents at the time. So I could be asleep on the couch for a week, just tired from one trip. I didn't travel well. I didn't travel. And that was one of the things that made me very nervous when I was coming to ESPN, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't understand how these people travel this much and how they can be so alert on TV. And the challenge of having to do live shots on 2 and 3 hours sleep, which was my big challenge the first time. You get into a city, you might get in there, like 9 or 10 o'clock the night before.
Right. And
because these NFL teams were all teams that I had never covered before, that means that my level of study, it takes me that much longer to feel prepared, especially when you're starting off. So then there were times where I wasn't going to bed until 2 or 3, and then I have to be up at 5 and be in front of a national audience by 7.
Right.
Like my first, and that, oh my God, that I can't tell you how hard that was. There was a lot of prayer. I honestly believe, from a spiritual level, that there was so much spiritual fortification that was helping me that first year, because honestly, there were times where I was not sure it was going to come out in English.
Right. And you ladies, talk about the unique dynamic of you both being, both were college athletes, both very attractive female reporters in a male-dominated field in terms of the athletes and the industry. Talk about how you tightrope that, you use that to your advantage, but yet still have to maintain your professionalism throughout the process.
Well, Josina, I think we could both answer that, because you were talking about working on your craft and having the respectability of the contacts of the athletes, the coaches, the general managers, and other reporters for that matter. But the biggest thing, I think, is having an athletic background. I think really helps you to understand the mentality of athletes, and moving on to the interviewer instead of the interviewee, it has a very delicate line there. So some reporters, you can tell who has the athletic background and who doesn't by the questions that they ask. Have you seen that as well?
I think that's a great point as far as the relatability that you show with the athletes or coaches, and your ability to understand even before you come in a locker room. So I would definitely agree. I think the homework aspect is big. Before I come into a locker room, as best as I have time with the travel schedule, I try to do as much homework as I can, because, I think the difficulty is that you're not staying with one team. You're constantly changing teams. There are times when I've been asked to, like when I was asked to do the Colts, and it was 12 o'clock and SportsCenter called me, we need you to have a report by 3 o'clock, and I had never covered the Colts before. This is after the Super Bowl. People are out of town, no one's there, and you're like, what am I? And so that's when it comes down to contacts and homework and being prepared, and to go to the point that you're really more trying to bring up with, having respectability in the locker room scenario. When I speak and I have a certain question, I think they can tell that I know what I'm talking about off jump. That allows you to have a certain authority when you speak that people can pick up off of. And then I would say also it's in how you present yourself. That's also very key. Listen, the way that you're dressed. I'm not coming in there with a mini skirt that's right below, whatever. I'm trying to signal with my jewelry, how I present myself, you know, that I'm coming in there, and I mean, it's not mean I'm not trying to be, you know, fashion forward, because I've always been into what I dress, but I'm still very conscious of it still signaling a professional tone.
Without a doubt, young lady, we couldn't be more proud of you, and seeing the success that you accomplished, helped in some small way by your time here, just gives us the energy to keep doing what we do. Thank you for being a part of our 700th show, and continue. And I'm glad they finally realized you could cover more than football, because your basketball ties are coming in as well.
Yes, I appreciate that. I think it was intended to be more last year, but Peyton Manning happened, Tim Tebow happened, and I was coming from Denver, so that thwarted that. But absolutely, I'm glad to get more of an opportunity this year.
All right, nothing but love for you, young lady. Thanks a lot for spending some time with us, and keep up the great work.
Congratulations to Christy. Thank you for having me on the show. Everybody who was back there listening, I wanted to say thank you. I appreciate all of you, and continued success.
Proud of you. Keep pushing.
All right, we're going to go to a quick break right now.